did we do? Why did we do it? What did we do? Why did we do it? It's a white man's burden in the name of murder. It's democracy by a big bayonet. It won't get you homies overseas, but that's not the point. We're not aiming to please. Hawaii is the Pineapple Express, sitting on beaches playing uninvited pest. Take what is yours and call it mine. Pearl Harbor now is ours, and it's not even a crime. What did we do? Imperialism. Why did we do it? What did we do? Imperialism. Why did we do it? Gotta help out our Cuban neighbors rid themselves of the Spanish flavor. It was a splendid little war. We closed the door, but those rough riders wanted so much more. We promised freedom to our Philippine ally, got rid of the Spanish, got them to fly high. Whoever China it's all close by. Keep the Philippines, they say. They won't know what to do with so much freedom anyway. We are the U.S. and we have come to play. We are the U.S. and we have come to stay. We are the U.S. and we have come to stay. What did we do? Imperialism. Why did we do it? What did we do? Imperialism. Why did we do it? It's a white man's burden in the name of murder, and it's democracy by a big bayonet. It won't get you homies overseas, but that's not the point. Not aiming to please. We are the U.S. and we are here to stay. We are the U.S. and we are here to stay. We are the U.S. and we are here to stay. We are the U.S. and we are here to stay. We are the U.S. and we are here to stay. We are the U.S. and we are here to stay. Imperialism. 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 All in. Imperialism.
Hey guys, sorry I couldn't be there today. I had a meeting that I completely was unaware of. So we're going to do a video lecture, and it might be kind of awkward to do it during class, but whatever. It is what it is. So let's go ahead and get going. So we're looking at the reasons why the United States is going to be turning to imperialism during the Gilded Age. And I think, a lot of these reasons will completely make sense to you. I think probably the biggest reason that the United States is going to turn to imperialism is because of the Industrial Revolution. I mean, we're producing so much stuff. And yeah, we have a large domestic market and people are buying our stuff, but we're producing so much that we definitely have a surplus. So we need to ship this stuff off to markets overseas and hopefully sell that off and make a profit off of that. We need raw materials. Of course, there's lots of resources within the domestic United States itself. However, in a lot of cases, you can get raw materials cheaper from other countries. Same thing with labor. Why not, if you're a Rockefeller or a Carnegie or something, why not have overseas businesses? We all know that if you have businesses overseas, that the labor is a heck of a lot cheaper. So, even during the Gilded Age, your big businessmen are going to be practicing in this by taking their business overseas. One of the reasons for lower taxes, for cheaper labor and stuff. So, again, I think this is probably the primary reason why the United States is going to move to imperialism. Industrial Revolution, it's pretty big. Yesterday we talked about this guy, Frederick Jackson Turner. Again, someone that you definitely want to remember. So remember, he wrote that book, Significance of the Frontier in American History. And, his whole thing was that basically our whole being, everything about the United States, how we came to be as a very successful nation was dependent upon westward movement. Well, eventually, like we said yesterday, we got there. So once we inhabit the United States from the east to the west coast, it's kind of like, all right, well, what happens now? People like Frederick Jackson Turner, hearing that the census is saying, oh, well, the frontier is closed, this kind of scares the heebie-jeebies out of him and government officials and whatnot, because, again, we're looking at how we achieved our greatness as a nation. And a lot of it came from Western expansion and the opportunities that Western expansion brought. So if we can't continue to push westward, what does that mean for our country? Like I said yesterday, it's like we're going to die or something. I mean, I know it's completely ridiculous that people would think that somehow the United States was going to, fall into some decline or something because we couldn't continue to push westward. But, that's just what people thought during that time. People wanted to maintain who we are as a society in terms of our individualism, our opportunities, nationalism, democracy. We value these types of qualities, and we're afraid that if we don't continue to move westward, that we're going to lose a sense of who we are as the United States of America and everything that just makes us fantastic and great. So remember, this is called the Turner's thesis. It's also called the Frontier thesis. The College Board will call it either, so just make sure that you know both terms. Another reason why the United States is going to pursue imperialism, pursue colonies, is because we're followers. Everyone else is doing it, so we need to do it as well. We want to be a powerful nation. We want to be like Britain. We want to be like Germany and other nations. So when you look at one of the things that makes those other nations powerful is the fact that they have colonies. Britain and other Western European nations, they got involved in the European game, pretty early. We are going to not get into this until the late 1800s. And by that time, most of the more profitable colonies are already going to be gobbled up by Britain and France and Germany and Spain and Portugal and Belgium and all these other imperialist nations. So there's not going to be a whole lot left over for us. But we're definitely going to sign on to the idea that in order to be a powerful nation, that we had to have colonies. And we also are going to adhere to the idea of the Western European nations in particular, that this was basically a burden of the Western European nations. It falls into the whole idea of social Darwinism. We looked at social Darwinism during the Gilded Age when it came to big business and how it's survival of the fittest. And a lot of people thought that, monopolies should be able to exist because it's survival of the fittest. If my business is bigger and badder than yours, then I should be able to get rid of you. It's like the laws of the jungle. Eat or be eaten. So it's the same thing when it comes to colonies, that the European nations and the United States is going to fall into this as well. They say that it is the white man's burden. It is our duty to go out there and to quote-unquote civilize these people who live in these backward places. We're going to call them savages, our little brown brothers, and all of that. And we feel that they are an inferior group of people. We are superior, so we have then the ability to take them over. We are a more powerful country. We should have the ability to take over the weaker nations. So again, the Western European nations, Russia will be in on this as well, so will Japan. They're all going to adhere to this idea, and of course, we're going to do the same thing. So there's another reason for you that we're following the example of European nations. And definitely, when we look at the idea of this, we're going to be abandoning our isolationism. Just as a side note as well, and I think I may have brought this up yesterday, I think Manifest Destiny is going to fall into this whole idea of social Darwinism. This idea that we needed to move westward to bring all of the things that American society had in terms of technology and education, ideas, all of these things were superior to like the Native American Indians, so we had to enlighten the Native American Indians. Well, again, I think we're probably starting to think also that we are superior to, other people, like in the Western Hemisphere, going back to the Monroe Doctrine in the 1820s. I mean, you could make that same argument that we were social Darwinists to an extent back then, because basically we're saying, European nations, you can't come and colonize anymore. We, the United States, we are the overseers of the entire Western Hemisphere. We know what's best for everyone else. That's very, I think, social Darwinistic. So I think that might be some good synthesis that you might be able to use in an essay that might be kind of helpful. So another reason that we want to follow example of other European nations. Another reason why we're going to kind of go out and about in the world a little bit more is going to be because of this guy who was a naval officer, very influential on Theodore Roosevelt. What he's going to say is that, again, when it comes to the idea of world power, and this was something that the United States was really heavily looking at in the late 1800s, because, again, we want to be on par with some of the big industrialized nations and imperialistic nations such as Britain and Germany, in particular. You look at both, especially Britain, but also Germany as well. You look at Britain, and the most powerful thing that they have is their navy. Their navy, they had the world's most powerful navy for a long, long time, going all the way back to the destruction of the Spanish Armada. And you start to have that slow but very steady increase in power of the British, and they're just going to run with it, and eventually they will have the most powerful navy in the world. And Alfred Thayer Mahan believed that was something that we needed to do as well. And again, Germany has a pretty powerful navy. Even the Japanese have a navy. So our navy was pretty sad at the time period. So, Mahan, he in his pamphlets and books and whatnot, is going to be talking about that we need to have this world-class navy in order to be on par with other Western European nations. And another thing that he's going to bring up that's super duper important is that, and I always have a problem pronouncing this word, so you can laugh if you want, but I can't say it, that we needed to have a oh my god, it's about as good as I'm going to get it. We need to have a freaking canal, okay, that basically connected the east to the west, because when you look at ocean travel during this time, and we're looking at the Gilded Age, we're looking at the 1800s, this is not like 5,000 years ago or something. We've got our ships. If you needed to get from the east to the west, you had to go all the way around South America, which is like completely ridiculous. So Mahan is going to say we need to have some type of a canal through a very narrow section. That's, oh god, here we go, the isthmus, okay, in Central America. Go through that. So if you can build a canal through that area, then you cut off, like, oh my god, like so much. So he's really going to be pushing for that. And who's going to pick this up and who's just going to completely run with it is going to be Theodore Roosevelt. And we'll see that, initially the French are going to be building, at least trying to build the canal, but it is the French after all. And too much wine and croissants and escargot and malaria and whatever. They're not going to be able to do it. So eventually we are going to take control of the Panama Canal under the Roosevelt administration, and that really becomes, in his eyes, his crowning hallmark of his administration. Also, really, really important too, especially when we start looking at some of the islands that we take in the Pacific, including Hawaii and American Samoa and other places. This idea that we need naval bases in the Pacific. Japan has opened up, China is opening up, sort of. So if we want to trade, if we want to tap into that trade, we have to have a navy. We have to have naval bases, because the Pacific Ocean's like really big, and you need to have ships be able to have like refueling, coaling stations as they hopscotch kind of their way across the Pacific Ocean to Asia. So very important that we need to have those strategic naval bases. So let's go ahead then and look at some of our first colonial possessions and Great political cartoon. We've got Uncle Sam, and he's looking at the imperialist tree, I guess, and he's plucking the fruits, which are representing various colonies. Now, we're not going to take Cuba as a colony, and we'll talk about the Cuban situation in a minute. I can't read some of these, but in the basket we have Alaska, it's like Texas, California, so different areas that we're taking, I guess, within the United States and within the world itself. So the first area that I want to look at is Alaska. So Alaska, if you know your geography, is pretty much right next to Russia, which is up here. Okay. The Secretary of the State, a guy named Seward, he had these ideas of somehow gaining control of Alaska. He thought it was pretty important for a couple reasons. One is going to be for security, okay, because the Russians are in the 1800s under the Tsarist governments are, you know, fairly doing well. They're sort of imperializing. They're doing trading and stuff with other Europeans. So there's this fear that the Russians perhaps might, at some point in time, cross over the Bering Straits into Alaska. And this was actually owned by Russia at the time. So the fear was that they would cross over and then they would go down Canada. And if they really, really wanted to, they'd be able to eventually invade the United States. So it seemed kind of a prudent thing for the United States to control Alaska. And Alaska also sitting on the Pacific, whatever. Again, we are looking for areas in the Pacific to enhance our trade with Asian nations. So Secretary of State Seward is going to push for the acquisition of Alaska. Everyone thought he was freaking nuts. You know, it was like, all right, what are we going to do with a bunch of ice? Walruses? Polar bears? I don't know. People were just like, what a waste of money. So we did end up purchasing Alaska, I think is for like $7 million. I mean, imagine that. You can buy a house for $7 million. That's freaking nuts. So we ended up purchasing it. People still thought it was like a complete waste of money. They called it Seward's Icebox as a joke. They also called it Seward's Folly. They didn't understand that this was actually a pretty good deal. Now, of course, nobody knew that sitting in Alaska was a bunch of gold and a bunch of oil as well. So, I mean, obviously this was a huge welcome surprise to Americans when we figured that out, that those deposits were there. So that's Alaska, 1867. And again, kind of with the same idea of, I'm flying everywhere. The same idea of gaining like coaling stations, fueling stations within the Pacific, trying to enhance our trade with Asia. We are going to go out and gain some islands within the Pacific. A couple islands, Midway, American Samoa, Pago Pago is part of American Samoa. So again, we're going to take these areas, again, largely to help with trade and military outposts as well. I did throw in Midway purposely here because if you remember, Midway will be pretty significant in World War II. So, pausing for a second here, Midway. Let's see if you guys remember this. Midway. What's the significance of the Battle of Midway? Think about it. Ding, ding. Who knows? Raise your hand if you know. What is the significance of Midway? Well, when we look at Midway, probably the biggest significance of this battle is that the war in the Pacific changes. You know, the United States had been pretty much fighting more of a defensive war, And after Midway and a lot of the Japanese aircraft carriers were destroyed, that the United States are going to start to push towards Japan with their island hopping strategy. So it turns more into an offensive war in the Pacific as a result of Midway. Now, obviously, this is a long ways away from 1867, but like I said, I just kind of threw that in there because Midway is kind of significant later. All right, Hawaii. I don't know if you guys have been to Hawaii. I have been there. I was not impressed. Although I did go to the, I went to Oahu, like with Waikiki Beach and all that. It was like so overly commercialized. I was kind of turned off to it. It was pretty and everything, but I was kind of like, meh, whatever. But, I get it. It's a laid-back lifestyle. It's kind of cool, I suppose. But I'd rather go to New York City or Chicago or even my hometown of Detroit. I don't know about Detroit, but whatever. All right, Hawaii. Now, Hawaii, same thing. We're looking at Pacific Ocean, so we're looking at this being a perfect place to have a coaling and refueling station, a military base. Pearl Harbor has a great harbor. It's a very deep harbor, and it'd be a great place to, keep some of our fleet there. So, Hawaii seemed kind of a good thing. There were a lot of American businessmen who were in Hawaii for quite some time, in the 1840s, 50s, 60s, whatever, for the lifestyle, but mostly because of sugar. Sugar was a very important crop to a lot of people. When we're kind of addicted to that, if you haven't, figured that out. So, sugar was a product that was in high demand during the Gilded Age. Hawaii grew it. They had a lot of sugar cane. So it was seen as a business venture for a lot of U.S. businessmen. So it was something that quite a few Americans went to Hawaii to participate in the sugar growing and sugar trade. So you've got these U.S. plantations. You also have missionaries over there, but not that important. But you have these businessmen who are basically controlling the sugar trade in Hawaii. One of the things that the businessmen were quite concerned about was the issue of tariffs. Okay, the tariff issue was problematic for the businessmen, especially later on when you have that McKinley tariff, if you remember that, was a tariff that was one of the highest tariffs our country had ever seen. And Hawaii not being part of the United States, they had to pay tariffs. Even though they were American citizens, the sugar was still coming from an area that was not part of the United States. So these American businessmen had to pay like these really high tariffs, and they didn't really want that. So we're going to find that the American businessmen really, really want to bring Hawaii into the United States as a territory, largely for economic reasons. They want to not have to pay these really high tariffs. So they're going to be pushing for that. So the leader of Hawaii was a guy named King Kalakaua. King Kalakaua. So King Kalakaua, he had to deal with a lot of these American businessmen, and the businessmen were pretty adamant and pretty aggressive in terms of saying, this is what we want. We want to rule this island. We are superior to you. We want our rules and our laws to govern this area. And Kalakaua and the Hawaiians are like, what the heck, but it is the Americans after all. So, Kalakaua is really not going to give in, but then the Americans basically, they put their own little, like, militia military together, and they're going to force King Kalakaua, literally by bayonet, by gunpoint, they're going to force him to sign a constitution that basically is going to legislate away most of the rights and powers of the Hawaiians. Speaking of bayonet, you might get a kick out of this. I can't bring this to school. I'm going to back up. Oh my god. So here I have a World War I infantry rifle from Turkey. This is a Turkish Mauser. So there's the bayonet right there. So by bayonet, King Kalakaua was forced to sign this new constitution, which basically legislated away all of the rights of the Hawaiians. Alright. This is not loaded, by the way, and don't try this at home. Alright. So the Bayonet Constitution. So this Constitution is going to be signed. Eventually, the Americans, they want to have complete control over Hawaii because, again, their main goal is to get Hawaii annexed as a territory, so they don't have to pay all these tariffs and whatnot. So you'll have the Americans try to overthrow, well, they will overthrow eventually the Hawaiian government. You also have the Hawaiian people, like in 1893, for instance, the Hawaiians on their own tried to revolt against the Americans, but it's not going to work. There's going to be a provisional government set up. It's actually kind of interesting that this is a name that you guys might recognize. So a guy named Sanford B. Dole. Dole, Hawaii, pineapples, yes. So Samuel Dole, same Dole family as the pineapple people. Samuel Dole is going to be put in head of a provisional government that the United States is going to basically set up to benefit their own interests. Now, after King Kalakaua died, his sister, Queen Liliuokalani, is going to become the new ruler, the new monarch of Hawaii. And, she didn't really have a lot of powers or anything, but the people of Hawaii were really encouraging her to do something about the situation. She really was considered a Hawaiian nationalist. She did not like the fact that the Hawaiians or the Americans had set up this provisional government. So she did everything she possibly could to prevent the Americans from completely taking over. But writings on the wall, the Hawaiians just aren't going to be able to do anything about the power of the Americans. So eventually she is going to be overthrown. And once she's overthrown, the provisional government is going to go to the American government. And at this time, Grover Cleveland was president at the time. And they're going to be trying to push for Hawaii to be annexed into the United States as a territory. Now, Cleveland, interestingly, was an anti-imperialist. He thought what was going on was completely insane, completely immoral, and that this shouldn't happen. And he definitely went out there. He said some pretty harsh words towards Dole and the provisional government, and he absolutely would refuse to even listen to the idea of annexation. And just time progresses, and the Americans are still trying. They're going to be trying to get Hawaii annexed into the United States. And to be honest, most people wanted it to be that way. So eventually, when McKinley is president in 1898, we have the Spanish-American War. It's also going to be going on during this time. That the sentiment of most Americans and our government is that we needed to have colonies. So definitely, when McKinley is president, he was very pro-imperialism. So Hawaii then will become annexed into the United States as a territory, not a state. It was a territory in 1898. Oh my God, I don't want this gun to drop. I'm afraid it's going to drop. Alright. So this is Pearl Harbor. It looks nothing like Pearl Harbor of today. If you've ever been there, totally different. But you can see it's a very large harbor. Good place, again, for Americans to kind of house their fleet. That is Queen Liliuokalani. So again, she was a Hawaiian nationalist. She did everything she possibly could to keep the Americans from taking over. But eventually she was forced to abdicate her throne. And this is kind of interesting. This is a petition of a bunch of Hawaiians that signed onto the idea of not allowing the Americans to annex Hawaii into the United States. The Hawaiian people wanted nothing to do with this. They wanted to be Hawaii. They wanted to rule themselves. They wanted the right to self-determination. So here we have a petition. There's hundreds upon hundreds of names that are on this. But yeah, obviously that got real far. So then that brings us to the Spanish-American War of 1898. And then here we have a whole bunch of Americans that are landing in Cuba. Cuba, why the heck would we be getting involved in Cuba? Well, hey, here's some, well, I don't know if this is totally synthesis, but if you remember, we've talked about Cuba. The southern states wanted to annex Cuba into the Union as another slave state to give them more political power in Congress. But, obviously that didn't happen. So what is the Spanish-American War all about? What the heck are we doing in Cuba? So Cuba, strategically speaking, is really kind of important to the United States. When you look at the location of Cuba, it's not that far. From my understanding, from the Keys down here, the Florida Keys, to Havana, which is just right across the water here, it's only about 50, 60 miles, maybe a little bit more than that, but it's pretty darned close. And then Cuba also sits at the mouth of the Gulf of Mexico over here. So strategically, we really want to make sure that whoever controls Cuba, be it if they're independent or controlled by another country or us, whatever, we want to make sure that whoever's there is friendly to our interest, because again, it is kind of the gateway into the Gulf of Mexico, which would, they would enter into waters that are very close to places like Texas and Louisiana and stuff. So we have that, strategic location that's important to us, and by this way, very important. Cuba is a Spanish colony. Spain still has a few colonies in the New World, not many, but they still have some, and this is one of them. Okay, so this is what I talked about, this Ostend Manifesto of 1854. This was the American South attempting to bring Cuba into the Union as a slave state in order to bring more political power to the South. But, like I said, it obviously that didn't happen. So that's Cuba. How did the Spanish rule Cuba? Well, the Spanish, to be, put it mildly, were not that friendly to the Cubans. They saw themselves as superior. They didn't have basic civil liberties. They had to pay high taxes. It was hard for Cuban business people because they had to pay taxes on their goods and whatnot. Anytime that the Cubans actually tried to say or do anything about their situation, the Spanish were pretty ruthless about how they dealt with it. We're going to see they have pretty much concentration camps they would put people in. They were not hesitant to execute people if they felt the necessity. The basic thing to remember here is that in terms of how Spain ruled over Cuba, is that the Cubans were denied that self-government. They didn't have the right to self-determination. They couldn't decide for themselves what their laws were. It was basically all determined by the Spanish. And again, the way the Spanish treated the Cubans was with not a lot of respect, and again, really denying them basic civil liberties. And you can see in this political cartoon how we viewed the Spanish as kind of this dark, shady, villainous type of a character. And of course, you look at us, and I don't know about our outfit and what that says about us, but, we're kind of like this Prince Charming type of a figure protecting the weak Cuban maiden. Oh my goodness. So, that's our perspective of the Spanish. We really did believe that the Spanish did treat the Cuban people pretty poorly. And some people are going to want to do something about that. We're going to want to help out. I mean, it's kind of reminiscent to, the United States and a lot of the oppression that we had as colonists before the American Revolution. So a lot of Americans likened it to that, and we should help them with their independence. These people want democracy, and they want the right to self-determination, so it would help. So there was a lot of Cuban unrest. It wasn't like the Cubans were like, yay, put me in concentration camps, yay, we don't want civil liberties. They were not happy about the situation. So there were various cases of Cubans having revolts and stuff. And like I said, every time that would happen, Spain would be pretty ruthless about it, trying to exile what they would consider the ringleaders. This guy right here, this is Jose Marti. He was a poet and a journalist, very well respected. He was great when it came to politics and stuff, and he was kind of like one of these ringleaders, and really promoting the idea of Cuban independence. So of course, what the Spanish are going to do is they're going to exile him and others, and so Martí spent a lot of time out of Cuba. He came to the United States eventually, spent time in New York, and he really tried to push the American government to do something about the situation. Again, kind of using the argument of independence. Hey, look, you experienced all these really bad things. Your right to self-determination was being taken from you. You were being taxed and treated unfairly. That's happening to us. You should help us. So, again, they really pushed for that. And we'll see that eventually some Americans anyways, are going to sign on to this idea that we needed to help them. So there was a big revolt in 1895. Jose Marti came back to Cuba for that. He was killed, as were many people. Also, we're going to have General Weyler, who was a Spanish guy who was pretty much in charge of what was going on in Cuba. He had established these concentration camps throughout Cuba to put people like Jose Marti and other Cubans who really didn't go along with the game. And Americans eventually are going to find out about all of this. And, to a lot of Americans, this was kind of shocking, because you're going to see in newspapers that images of these Cubans in concentration camps are going to be published, and it was really, 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 really shocking. Okay. So let's look at the causes of a Spanish-American War, because eventually we are going to get involved. So, why are we eventually going to go to war with Spain? We don't go to war with Cuba, by the way. We want to help the Cubans, sort of. But we're going to go to war with Spain. So what are the causes of this? Well, the first one's going to be humanitarian. And this was what I'm just telling you guys about, that you have these images of these Cuban people who are being put into these concentration camps. And, you look at these photos, and, it really could be something out of the Holocaust. And these were published in newspapers, and the people were appalled, and some people definitely began to lobby for the United States government at least to do something about the situation. May not be go to war necessarily with Spain or whatever, but when you have 200,000 people that are dying of hunger and disease, and we're just kind of sitting there doing nothing, some people are just going to be like, it's our duty, it's our role, we really should do something about it. Of course, the economic interest, everything we do, everything when it comes to imperialism, is going to be about our economic interest. The fact of the matter is that there were sugar plantations owned by Americans, tobacco plantations owned by Americans, and it was money. We traded with them, and it was money. So the fact of the matter is that the Spanish allowed the situation to take place where you had all these Americans basically controlling the tobacco and sugar trade in Cuba. Some American businessmen are going to be a little bit kind of weary about the United States actually getting involved, because, what if you have a situation where the Spanish that are overthrown, who's going to be put in place? Is it going to be these Cuban nationalists who are then going to kick out American businessmen? So, the trade situation, we want to keep that going. However, some of the American businessmen were a little skeptical about the situation, because it was kind of like, well, if these Cuban nationalists take over, they're going to kick us out of Cuba, and we're going to lose all that business. But, again, the economic interest is definitely going to be a reason. A lot of people are looking at the trade, and might be a reason why we need to help out in the situation. Yellow journalism. So yellow journalism is basically sensationalized news stories in order to sell newspapers. It's pretty simple. Two guys, William Randolph Hearst and Joseph Pulitzer, they competed with each other over newspaper sales. So both of them began to publish these crazy stories about what was going on in Cuba, just basically to sell newspapers. So they put together these over-the-top stories. You think about, you can have a story in a newspaper about some Cuban woman that was arrested by the Spanish. And it's kind of like, all right, well, there was a Cuban woman that was arrested by the Spanish. Yeah, that's sad, but whatever. But if you could spice it up a little bit, and you can turn that headline into something like, beautiful maiden Spanish beauty raped and murdered by evil Spanish ruthless bastard. And then you go into the story and you talk about how the lady was the beautiful Cuban maiden was pregnant, and they cut her open with a machete, and they scooped out her unborn baby with a spoon, and they ate all the entrails, and they took the baby, and they took the placenta, and they oh my god, I'm going a little too far with this, but that would be sensationalism. I got another example for you, actually, which I thought was kind of funny. I don't know if you can. Oh, what happened? Oh, okay. I don't know why it's doing weird things, but this says Abraham Lincoln was a woman. And there's the picture. That's really creepy. Sensationalism. That is yellow journalism. So these over-the-top stories about Spain, Americans were reading this stuff. They were like, ooh, oh my god, and we have to do something about this situation. So yellow journalism. It's called yellow journalism because I don't remember which one. It was either Hearst or Pulitzer. There was a cartoon character that was published in one of the newspapers, and the character was called the Yellow Kid, and everything the Yellow Kid said was completely over exaggerated. So that's why they use the term yellow journalism. And then you have the Delhomme letter, and I think I'll cover the Delhomme letter. Hopefully we have enough time for this. So the Delhomme letter, this was a letter that was written by the Spanish, and it was to a Cuban friend. And in this, the Spanish guy, Delhomme, he's the ambassador, he's criticizing our president. He's criticizing Mr. McKinley. Oh my god, look down here. He's saying McKinley is weak. He's a bidder for the admiration of the crowd. Besides being a would-be politician. Oh my god, he's like a liar or something. Go figure on that. So he tries to leave a door open behind himself while keeping on good terms with the Jingos of his party. Jingoists are people who promote a very aggressive foreign policy. So, here we have the Spanish ambassador criticizing our president. We must go to war. Oh my god. Okay, and of course this is all published in the newspapers. Americans get all cray-cray and everything over this, and people are going to start to push for war against the Spanish. I mean, oh my god, can you imagine? I mean, think about all of the criticism of Obama, and even going back to Bush and Clinton or whatever. Think about all of the criticism these presidents have to endure during their administrations. If we went to war with every time somebody said something negative about, our little Mr. President, we would just be in a constant state of war. I need to get my gun out. I need to get my bayonet, right? I need to protect myself. Oh my god. Crazy. Totally crazy. So that's the Delhomme letter. That's another reason why. And I think I'll go ahead and save this for tomorrow because it's a Lulu, as they say. It's a biggie. So the sinking of the USS Maine, this is going to be one of the main reasons. Ha ha ha, made it funny. I didn't even mean to. The sinking of the USS Maine is one of the main reasons we got, whatever, it's dumb. So I'll start off with this tomorrow, and then we'll get into the Spanish-American War itself and the acquisition of the Philippines. Yeah. So maybe if you have a little time left over, you can kind of absorb all the information. Maybe talk about U.S. imperialism with a buddy or something. Like, I'm sure you're all going to do that. Anyways, I shall see y'all tomorrow. If you have any questions, you can come by later. Again, I'm only gone for first period today, so fifth period. Sorry. Fifth period, I am going to go over the last test. So if you want to see the multiple choice test and go over those questions that y'all missed, then come on in. And we'll go over that, and we'll get you up to speed. All right? Adios, amigos. I hope you like my rap. And I'll leave you with my cool shirt. Since I've been talking about the AP class recently and all of us crazy, cultish AP US history teachers, this was a shirt that the AP US history teachers put together last year for the crazy redesign. So forget the zombie apocalypse. I survived the A-Push redesign. That's right. Alright guys, have a good one, and maybe I'll see you 5th period. Bye.